Okay, awakening the dragon. What that says is that China is awakening in a couple of ways. One, we know they're awakening economically. They have a 10% growth per year. America has 2 to 3 on a good year. We know they're doing well in the Olympics, at least they did last time. But they're also awakening with regard to the gospel. And maybe 100 to 200 million believers in China today. We can't count them because religion is officially banned, or at least effectively banned, if not officially banned. This is the 10 Great Mission Fields class. And if you didn't know, we have done Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, we've done the Middle East, and Europe, and Russia. And last time we did India. And I'm still under the weather from India. We got back a month ago. Can you believe that? I was good in India, but since then I haven't been so good.
Don't talk about it. We won't get anybody else to go with us.
Hey, there's your leader right there. I'm staying home, okay? South Asia is also India and its neighbors, but tonight I'm attempting to do East Asia, and then we'll do Southeast Asia, maybe Oceania, and North America. Bro, where's our byline? Oh, there it is. Okay, there's the byline. So our byline is this. The Perspectives class was God's heart for missions in the Old Testament. Psalm 67, David said, let us go and take the good news to all the world. And Matthew 28, Jesus said, the Great Commission. And you know what those are, because we've said them every time. Well, my MO is this. Numbers 13, 18. When the spies went into the Promised Land, and a year and a half ago I was at Kadesh Barnea with a group from this church, 30 of us. We had just climbed Mount Sinai. Okay, that was one of the high points. We were also quite high. And it says this, see what the land is like and whether the people who there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they walled or fortified? How's the soil? If fertile or poor? Are the trees on it? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land. Now, what it doesn't say is about the people. And so I'm going to talk about the land and the people and the culture and the politics and the economy and the history. It's slightly different than Perspectives in the sense that we're taking it region by region and we're looking at the world Christian movement and the setting in situ that it's occupied in. Here's China. It's not real clear. Does that sharpen up at all, John? Interestingly, China is about the size of the U.S. Latitudinally, east to west, north to south, about the same size as well. Just has 4.5 times as many people. I'm going to start with environmental issues, and then we'll go to politics, then we'll go to religion, and then we'll go to the economy, and then we're going to have a special movie tonight. We call it Mission Cinema, and tonight is the end of The Sixth Happiness with, does anybody remember who that was with? Ingrid Bergman. Okay, and she is a missionary, Gladys Allworth, and she is powerful in what she does, and you'll see more about it. In the 1930s, rescuing the Chinese from the Japanese. We also had a video on Hudson Taylor, and I don't think we'll have time for it. It wasn't quite as exciting, but there's many that we could show. Let's start out with environmental issues. Severe deforestation, because the people are cutting the biofuels to cook and to warm themselves, just like India. That produces soil erosion and massive flooding because the root system is destroyed. Three Gorges Dam on the Yangtze River is producing heavy environmental impact. 2 million people are having to be displaced, and a lot of species will be disappearing. Polluted rivers and lakes filled with industrial and human waste. When you have 1.4 billion people, you know, the lakes and rivers are used as sewage devices. Nobody's swimming. When I was in China, I didn't see anybody swimming. And it was also, it was an attack on your olfactory senses. Desertification in the north and east, and the cities are polluted. 10 of the top 10 cities in the world, the top 10 are Chinese cities, because they can burn coal, they don't have scrubbers, and they're not too concerned about environmental because it's a developing country, regardless of what you thought about. And they'll get to that just a little bit later. So starting at 11 o'clock is the Three Gorges Dam. Soil erosion in Inner Mongolia, the Huanghe Basin. Yangtze's flooding at 3 3 o'clock, deforestation in the south. We can't quite read those, so I'll go on. Here's the Three Gorges area where the dam will be built. Jumping from the Yangtze, which is now called the Changjiang, up to the Huanghe, which is also known as the Yellow River, or China Sorrow. Many dikes have been put in because of the flooding that occurs here because of this deforestation and flooding, wiping out large numbers of people and villages. For thousands of years it has happened. This is the Yellow River, also known as China Sorrow. You want to see it? There it is. That's what it looks like on a sunny day. I'm from Missouri, so show me a muddier river than the Missouri, and it'll be the Huanghe right here. The sediment is loess deposits of aeolian wind-deposited soil that are held in suspension. And here we are on the Loess Plateau in the north. It's deforested. Look at the heavy erosion. The last time I showed a picture like this was Madagascar. Remember? The same issue, deforestation, loss of root systems, and erosion. Here's a little bit of corn being produced in the Loess Plateau. The loess is very soft. It's a soft limestone, so people dig their houses out of it and live, and they're well insulated. Of course, the national pastime in America is to try to get in line and see the pandas at the zoo in San Diego, but when I'm in China, I see the pandas. No line. Yes, I took these. This is in Beijing Zoo. So here's some of the physical. We won't go into physical because we are running ahead to get to the more interesting stuff. The cultural geography, the cultural anthropology, the setting for the gospel. Okay? That's where we're going. Anyway, I want to say Loess deposits. You see that? L-O-E-S-S? This is misspelled because there's an umlaut over the O. And it's called like this, Loess. It was a good German who decided that this was going to be named after him. And a lot of the geomorphology in China is named after the Germans. Here's an interesting plate tectonics, where three plates come together. The Eurasian plate, the Philippine plate, and the Pacific plate. Consequently, next time we're going to do Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan. And there's a lot of activity going on there in Korea. Some in Taiwan, none in Japan, basically. But the skylines are very low because of the plate tectonics and the heavy earthquake possibilities, like we've seen in
Chile.
South America, Chile, Concepcion, most of the cities destroyed. Dodi Files and Mike are taking a truck in today and distributing food and water, and we prayed this morning that their truck wouldn't be overturned and attacked, and they would be safe because there's looting and rioting going on in Concepcion right now. All the churches, Assemblies of God, and pastors are safe, we're told. Where's Pat? Did she leave? Okay, there she is, right. So we got that word from. If you took my class, you would have to memorize the temperatures and the precipitation graphs for every station in the world. This is China. We won't go into it, but you would learn in the column on the left, the legend, the A climates are tropical, the B climates are dry, the C climates are mid-latitude, the D climates are continental and cold, and finally the H climates are the highlands like in Tibet. Okay? China is a lot like America in this regard. It's the same latitude, north to south, east to west, it's the same climate. In the north and east, it's called Manchuria. It's like Boston and New York, a lot of snow. In the south and east, it's like Atlanta and Miami. It's a humid subtropical and moderately warm and temperate climate. As one goes west, it gets drier and gets more altitude, just like in America. The only difference is we have California, thank goodness, and they don't. Okay. So we won't go into the climographs that I painstakingly drew for my students. Now this is Mount Fuji. It is in East Asia, and normally I would do them together, but there's such a good story in China about what is happening in the church that we will save Japan, and we will save the exciting things going on in South Korea for next time, and we'll have some special speakers. So this is just a little teaser, but I will show pictures of when I climb Mount Fuji. Here are the different zones of China. We don't have time to go into each one and talk about the regional differences as we might. Here's the South China Sea off the coast of China. Here's the inland waterway that connects Nanjing, Shuxi, Wuzhou, Shanghai, and Beijing. Again, it's polluted and it doesn't smell very good, but it is an inland waterway for our commerce. I took this picture out of the bus window to show that yes, the cities are very polluted. When you look in the distance, you see gray. But it is a sunny day if you look straight up. Because of the coal burning, no scrubbing, no environmental controls, China has taken a great leap forward, yes, in their economy, but there was a cost. It was water pollution, it is deforestation, and it's terrible environmental pollution from air, from coal burning, and hydrocarbons. And now, a new wave of automobiles are coming on. This is my view from a hotel in Beijing. It's about 15 million people. And if you go to China, you must go to Beijing. You don't get to go to Hong Kong and sneak up on the train to Guangzhou, which used to be Canton, and say you're in China. That's no good. Because the South is different than the North. The South is very commercialized, very capitalistic, very heavy with foreign direct investment. The North is very kind of communist doctrine and very much under military and martial law. In the South, the physical is the prettiest part of China. It's just difficult to get to. Here we are, a couple of miles from Kunming, where Bob Menzies has his Southwestern Bible College. And if you go down the river from Kunming to Guilin, as I did on this trip, you'll see houseboats. You'll see beautiful karst topography. That was another German geomorphologist who named this kind of limestone uplift, which creates a beautiful landscape. The most beautiful parts of China are not any place that you can get very easily. They are remote and you have to fly in. There's no roads, no trains. But once you get there, I was going down the river all day looking for a Coke. And some people were looking for a cold beer. And there was at this particular time. It was a beautiful countryside. Anyway, we're going now from environmental to politics. We are making progress. I'm going to jump in a little bit of history with Marco Polo 1250 because nobody knew anything about the Middle Kingdom up until that time. It was isolated by desert, ocean, mountains, and again, another ocean to the south. Nobody went there, nobody reported on it. Marco Polo went over that in 1250, and it was the Silk Road, as he called it, with a lot of banditry. And Kublai Khan and Genghis Khan later made use of him and his knowledge, and he became a high-level officer in the court. He migrated back to Venice about 30 years later. No one would believe his story, but later they did, and they elected him mayor. And that was the discovery of China for the first time. 2 centuries later, there was occupation by the British after the Manchus defeated the Mings in 1644. And even though the Manchus were the dynasty at the time, the British occupied it for 200 years. What were they interested in? They were interested in silk. They were interested in spices, and they just happened to eat off of these platters that were highly fired in the ovens, a very thin clay which was highly glazed, and for better reason they just called it China. They just called it China porcelain. And now when we open the cupboard and the dishes fall out, even the plastic ones, they hit the bottom, I say, honey, the China didn't break. It's the Melmac, okay? So it caught on. And then the British withdrew in 1900 after they had kind of mesmerized the Chinese with opium to weaken them. And they finally made a pact. They lost the war, the Boxer Rebellion as it was called, and they said, we're leaving on Christmas Day, 1900. Anybody that's not on ship will be left behind. And some people were still smoking the opium and got left behind, and therefore they were what? They were, what do we call it when they're left behind? They were leaving from Shanghai, by the way.
Shanghai.
They were Shanghai, okay. That's what happened to the leftover British soldiers. That's why there's some English people still in China today. But the Japanese came in shortly after that. And one of the missionaries from Britain that tried to join the China Inland Mission, which was the strong mission that some of the early missionaries formed, Gladys Allward, we're going to have a video on her in just a second. She rescued the Chinese and took them over the mountains to escape the invading Japanese and has become a very strong folk hero. The Last Emperor, maybe you saw the movie, it was the Manchu Dynasty. It was 1911, it won 10 Academy Awards. And Sun Yat-sen, I call him the grandfather, the George Washington of China, because he started a democracy on top of a dictatorship of the Manchus, of the Manchus. And he died, though, in 1925, and Chiang Kai-shek took over, okay? and he was a nationalist, going to continue, but the problem was that nobody had anything to eat, and so Mao had a great following, and he started fighting Chiang, and then the Japanese invaded, and so they teamed up together to defeat the Japanese, thanks to the Americans, and then they started fighting each other again. You know what happened, don't you? In 1949, Mao won. Okay, and Chiang had to move over to Taiwan, ready to take the mainland back with the help of the Americans. And at that time, the Americans said, we will help you, and if there's any invasion the other direction from China to Taiwan, it was the People's Republic on the mainland, and China, nationalist China, was Taiwan. We will defend you. And now we're stuck with that, and there's big issues right now over that particular statement and promise that we made. Well, anyway, Marxist state control, people couldn't leave the land, go to the city, the north they leave the country. The worst part of it was the Cultural Revolution in 1976 under Mao. People were killed, intellectuals were killed, Christians were killed, up to 20 million. And we made a little typo right there. But that was 20 million died. But fortunately, Mao died in 1976. And moderates took over. Deng Xiaoping, there was a liberalization, more openness, and the country started to thrive. In 1989, there was a special event, the Tiananmen Square Massacre. I'll show you pictures in just a second. And this was good in a way because it showed that the politics was not going to yield. Decadent, and there's a lot of public opinion against China, against the leaders, and that continues to this day. Well, liberalization, more openness. When Europe dropped, the Soviet Union dropped to communism in Eastern Europe, China kicked it up a notch because they were afraid of losing out. So there was repression of all political, religious, and ethnic dissent, paranoia over the Trinity, over Taiwan, because China wants it back, and America is going to defend it. And what do? We just made a purchase, we just allowed Taiwan to purchase $8 billion worth of defense equipment from us a couple of months ago, souring our relationship with the People's Republic. They want Taiwan back. Tibet, of course, they've got Tibet. And what does America do? They meet with the Dalai Lama, who is the head person for Tibet's independence. They're paranoid over Japan and the China Sea, which is said to have lots of oil deposits. Here we are in Manchuria, and during the reign of the Europeans in the south, Russia had control over the north of China. Everybody had a piece of it, and they built some Russian Orthodox churches here. Here's a population settlement, 1.4 billion people in the size of the United States, but most people, as you can see, are in the eastern third of the country, meaning that the population density is about 10 times that of the U.S., especially the North China Plain and the Sichuan Basin. Politics continued. There's pressure on the U.S. in world trade. China holds $700 billion, actually $750 billion worth of foreign exchange of U.S. securities, government bonds, okay? Because...
They just sold some of it.
What?
They just sold.
Yeah, but not much. China's interested in technology, trade, tourism in Taiwan. What they're doing is threatening to say, look, we could dump your securities and your economy is going down the toilet because you're talking to the Dalai Lama and he's trying to keep us from taking back Tibet, and then you just gave $7 billion worth of arms to Taiwan, and we want Taiwan back. It's just like us selling arms to Alaska because Alaska wants to be free. We wouldn't like that very much. So China is taking offense and they're dumping a little bit. But they're not going to dump much because if it wrecks our economy, then they don't have anybody to sell to, and then they get unemployment, which is already at 20%. So that is not going to happen, but at the same time, they're keeping their currency very low, so their products are very cheap, so we buy a lot of them, and we can't sell anything over there, and that's causing trouble as well. The government tries to control information, but is promoting technology, promoting the internet, and groups like Google that have free reign on information are under security threats in China over the last 6 months. Government sends students abroad, and there's a lot of students at San Diego State. Some of the people here, Chuck and Jonine, how many students do you have in your house?
We have two, but we have a Chinese Bible study in our home.
You do have a Chinese Bible. Do the students that you have come to that Bible study? Very good. Well, we have a new faculty member in geography, and he is a Chinese faculty member. His name is Lian, and he is a Christian, and he holds a Christian Chinese Bible study in his house. I invited him tonight so he could talk a little bit about China and the closeness of being Christian in China. He is out of town right now at a conference. So government's sending students abroad, as many as they possibly can. We have many at the UC schools, but at the same time, they expect that the people are going to go for this totalitarianism. So the twain are not going to meet. In the long run, there's going to have to be moderation and more openness, the way I see it, because people are rebelling.
So Fred, explain that again. Why would they send all these young, brilliant Chinese students to America where there's democracy? What do they really?
Why do they do it? They want the technology, they want the training, they want the intelligentsia, and they want the brain drain to come back to China. What's happened is, when people see the closeness of China, they try to stay here.
Yeah,
and all of our great graduate students in our department in geography, about a third of our graduate students, we got about 100 graduate students, master's and PhD, a third of them are Chinese.
Wow.
Most of them try to stay here when they're done. It's kind of a brain drain in the opposite direction. They want those people to go out, get the technology, get the latest techniques, and bring it back so they can generate the great leap forward. But nobody wants to go back because of the repression.
Yeah.
Okay? And so it's kind of like a paradox, oxymoron is what I'm trying to say. Well, this is what Shanghai looks like. I'm not going to show you many pictures of Shanghai, because Shanghai is plastic. Shanghai is not the real China. Shanghai is not the China of the other 99%. It's the inland China, the poor China, the China where very little access to resources. But this is beautiful. It's kind of like Dubai in the middle of the Middle East, where most people are downtrodden. The unemployment rate is 30%. The illiteracy rate is 40%. And you look at Dubai and say, oh, isn't the Middle East wonderful? We've got all these petrodollars. Well, China is investing in Shanghai for that reason. It's a PR stunt. The rest of the country doesn't look like this, but this is very impressive. We don't have time to go into the languages, but we would. Suffice it to say that the largest and most spoken language in the world is Mandarin Chinese, and it's the green language right there in the middle. Okay. Politics continue. The one-child policy. What is the effect on the population? It's to control population growth, and it has worked. Their natural rate of increase is 0.6%, just like America's. Most of the European countries are minus percentages because the population is falling. Well, what has the one-child policy done, in my opinion? There's been a disproportionate number of male babies, okay. Female lines traced through the male, so every family has to have a male. Out of obedience to the ancestor heritage and ancestor worship. High divorce rate, 20 million abortions a year, 1 million in the United States. So that gives you some measure of proportion, 20 times as much. 40% of the world's suicides in China, so someone is not happy. Okay? 40% of the world's suicides in China, someone is not happy. There's rape reductions, female slavery, incest, prostitution, rapid increase of AIDS is the result, in my opinion, of the one-child policy. Here we are at Tiananmen Square. Here we are at the Forbidden City. It was forbidden because Kublai Khan and Genghis Khan limited anyone from coming in to the city who was a male, unless they were castrated. And you would have the eunuchs running around doing the work, because all the women were theirs. That's where the word Forbidden City comes from. And this is just one of the pavilions out of maybe 100. This is the Gate of Heavenly Peace. You don't see many pictures of Mao anymore because of what he did during the Great Proletariat Cultural Revolution, 1966-1976. It was a purge of the country. 20 million people died, almost as bad as Stalin and Pol Pot in Cambodia. But this is the one picture that they've remained. Here's the largest standing army in the Tiananmen Square. Here's a march and a parade. Here's Tiananmen Square and the Forbidden City. Tiananmen Square is down to the south, the world's largest public square. From the air, that's a rephotograph. This is a rephotograph or a picture of a map. I'm showing where Beijing is because I flew in from San Francisco to Beijing. It was in the middle of the night. It's about a 17-hour flight. And they said, I got in the cab and they said, where are you going? I said, the Great Wall Hotel. And I went to sleep. The next morning I woke up at the Great Wall. I looked up and there it was, right outside the window of the car. They missed the hotel part. It was the Great Wall Hilton. When there's too many people in one country, they spread. And this is the great Hakka diaspora. In all of Southeast Asia has heavy Chinese. It's a small, they're in the minority, but they're usually the most commercial, and they're usually the leaders of the capitalist system. And they're getting in trouble with these people because the reporting in the news is that the Muslims in Indonesia are fighting with the Christians, who are the Chinese. East Timor is a good example. Okay? But actually what's happening is the Chinese are so resented because they're so entrepreneurial and upwardly mobile that they're getting in trouble with the local population. They just happen to be Christian, and the local people happen to be Islamic. Here's Zhou Enlai, who took over after Deng Xiaoping and helped modernize and liberate China. It's not, liberated yet. These are the different territories during the different periods on the lower left. We don't have time to go into the historical expansions of the different dynasties, but we could. Suffice it to say that the Ziggy spot is the Great Wall. It's the only man-made structure you can see from space. And what did Buzz Aldrin say yesterday? What did Buzz say? Buzz Lightyear, no, Buzz Aldrin. He was one of the first men on the moon. 1978, remember? Our good friend Neil Armstrong. What did he just say yesterday? Well, I think that we could easily get to Mars. We should push for it. Guess what? There's nothing there. And we've not found anything that we could really use out there. It's costing a lot of dough. So I say, wacko, forget it. Here's the Great Wall. On this particular day, I did not ride my motorcycle and jump over the wall. But Evel Knievel did. And this wall, of course, in this section was rebuilt. It was built by the Mings to keep out the invading Mongols who were on horseback. And the Han people were sedentary farmers, and they were basically no match to these horse-ridden invading monks. So he built this wall. It's the largest structure ever built in the world. And it was built by hand between the 12th and the 14th centuries AD. And what do they say in China? What is one of the statements of Confucius? If you want to do anything or build anything, what do? You start out with what? One brick at a time, one brick at a time. The Great Wall was built one brick at a time.
So how tall is that?
It's about 30 feet tall, about 20 feet wide, and 4,000 miles long.
Wow.
So I rode a bicycle on the Great Wall, but do I have pictures? No. These are the spheres of influence by the different occupying forces. In the south is the French, in the north is the Germans, in the very far north are the Russians. The main group is the British in the red. Here's some policemen. They're in Tibet. Of course, China occupies Tibet. Tibet wants to be free. The Dalai Lama is the spokesperson for this movement, but it's not going to happen in our lifetime. It doesn't appear. They're looking at a street vendor, and they're eating some ice cream. The possibilities for entertainment outside of Shanghai are very, very light, very low in China. There's not many things to do. There's not cinema to go to. They'll go to the opera, or they'll go to the acrobats, and that's about it. Here's a protest rally, which are becoming more numerous, but they're being put down and not reported, so we really don't know how often the protest rallies occur. Every workplace, usually huge factories. Kathy's brother is a manager at a factory in Guangzhou, 30 miles north of Hong Kong, and what does it make?
Computers, printers.
Hewlett-Packard printers. One rolls off assembly line every 15 seconds. Guess how many employees are in that factory? 300,000. That's like Escondido and Chula Vista and El Cajon together. He goes over for, how long, a month, and maybe comes back for a month. And so you have nurseries, mainly male babies, at every workplace. I just wanted to share some demographic indicators with you. Just look at the top line, 1.3 billion, 350 people per square mile, and in America it's about 60. Okay? Natural rate of increase is just like the U.S., 0.6. Ours is due to modernization and choice. Theirs is due to the government, one-child policy. Total fertility rate and percent urban, only 41. Okay? China's life expectancy, 69 and 72. Pretty good considering the per capita income is only $1,000. Considering that it's a poor, developing country, but China would like you to believe otherwise and did everything possible to give you the PR show during the Olympics, of course. Anything else I want to show? Percent illiteracy, female is 3 times the male. And we saw that also in India, didn't we?
Because they're not allowed to go to school?
Yes. Here's a signboard that's suggesting the one child only. It's like having one child, he's going to be a prince. Having 2 childs, a second child is going to be a demon. Okay, that's what this signboard is saying. Now they're not going to euthanize the child, but they will present a set of extra taxes. Here's a Chinese gentleman painting the silk fans by hand, and these are great gifts to bring back because you can pot them in the suitcase, they don't take much space and they're very light, and you can hand them out to your friends. Here's a State Farm. Much of the state farms have been privatized since I took that picture in 1985. But I visited a state farm, I went to lunch, I went through the housing, talking to the people. Here's a gal carving jade. Their semi-precious stone is jade, and you see figurines everywhere. This is one of the classes I taught at San Diego State. Basket weaving, okay.
But it wasn't underwater.
Production of textiles is one of the economies. Back in Nanjing, used to be known as Nanking. This is the Sun Yat-sen Memorial. There's steps going up. Very beautiful pagodas with a blue tile roof. And something happened. I ran into the girls' basketball team from Nanjing, and we played little hoops for a while. Over in the corner, the guys are playing the original marble game that was invented in China. What do you think it is?
Chinese checkers.
Chinese checkers is what it is. Okay. Here I am in a tower overlooking Nanjing, the mulberry trees where all the silkworms hang out. It's down below. And this Safford traffic circle, produced by the British with their 200 years of occupation, shows the buses going clockwise, which is the opposite of our traffic circles, which go counterclockwise. The children are starting to dress Western, but if you go to the park, you'll see 10 to 12 people in a boat instead of 2, like you would in America. Here's an old guy. He was with Mao on the Long March against Chiang. He lost one of his fingers and 2 of his toes. He's reliving it in his mind. He can't get it out of his mind. He can't sleep very good. I don't know if that's true, but it seems like it should be. Okay. Here's Wuxi, and I got on the trolley with my grandson and Kathy last week, and we went through San Diego State Underground. I thought Bill Lawrence was going to be here because he did the tunnel. And Chinese students got on, they sat right in front of us. I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Suzhou." I said, "Oh, I was in Suzhou. Remember that evening park, the park around the water? Oh, it's so pretty." He said, "Oh yeah, you were there." I said, "Yes, I had a group of 40 following me, and I didn't observe the closing time, and at dark they closed and they locked the gate, and we were out there in that park without any lights, wandering around trying to get out of there." And it was quite a story that I don't have time to tell, but it was my fault, okay? And so I got ripped about that. There's a Chinese junk on the Yansees. How many people have been to see the terracottas? Okay? Has anybody been to see? I'm the only one who's been to see the terracottas. Well, this is one of the top 10 tourist things in the country, in the world. You know, there's the pyramids, and there's King Tut, and there's the Acropolis, and there's Borobudur, and perhaps there's the Grand Canyon, I don't know. But certainly in East Asia, it would be the terracottas. Now these are 2,000 soldiers of life size that were guarding the Qin tombs. And this material is the loesch, and it was covered, the Aeolian wind-deposited soil. And it was discovered in 1991. This is one of the gals on one of my trips. Her parents were missionaries in China. And she was a medical doctor at the University of California, San Francisco. This is at the Wild Goose Pagoda, where the terracottas are. Does anybody know where the terracottas live? What's the name of the town? It's X-I-A-N. Xi'an. Everybody say Xi'an.
Xi'an.
That's how they pronounce it. And on the back table, you'll see a terracotta. Okay? I brought one back. This gal's making terracottas. These guys are selling terracottas. The thing is, they're keeping people out because inside the terracottas, well, the local people would overrun it because they're wanting you to buy the beautiful terracottas. Now, this is the original terracotta, and after this class, it will be going straight to the Smithsonian. Okay? And they're going to take out O.J. Simpson's suit, and they're going to replace it with this terracotta right here. So take a look back there at the table. We're going to take a break in just a second and have some fortune cookies. Now, my wife made the cookies, I made the fortunes, and we stuffed them all together. But afterwards, we're going to see a video on Inn of the Sixth Avenue. Does anybody remember that movie? Yeah. I mean, it was just it was a tearjerker, and Kathy found a section of it on the internet. We're going to see that, and I think you're going to enjoy that in just a second. So hang on. Here's where Xi'an is. You don't just go take a little bus ride from Beijing or Shanghai to Xi'an. You've got to take an airplane ride of 4 or 5 hours to get in there. So you have a purpose, and that is to see the terracottas. You're not going to accidentally see them. Now this sign says, "No photography allowed." But since I can't speak Mandarin or read it, I went ahead and took my pictures, okay? And you know, you get used to this. I just bought 2 more diamond fries today. They're little teeny ones. You go like this. You take them like this. Nobody even notices. When you come up to here, and then you start taking flashes, that's when you get in trouble. Okay? is a hotel in Beijing. Here's the Yanxis. Here's the South China Sea. The Chinese are not big beach goers. They're not big suntan artists. And some of the coastline is very polluted, but some of it is also very beautiful. That's near Fujian. Religion. The government goal, elimination of all religions. Okay? Someone asked me how come I was dressed up like this, and I said, well, I've been trying to dress like Larry Wagner, all the time. Finally, I achieved it, and so he came because he knew that I was going to dress like him. So here I am, but I hadn't worn this tie in about 4 years. There's a bend in it right here. So I stuck it in the Book of Concord and shut it. Then I went off to play tennis, and 3 hours later I came back and there's still a bend in it. So I tried to resolve the Protestants and the Pentecostals as best I could. That's Luther's book, by the way. It's called the Book of Concord. I got a red one. I must say I don't read it every night, but as much as possible. So anyway, now one religion you could probably guess. Here's the Three Self-Patriotic Movement, TSPM. This is the church in China, but it's controlled by the government. Because you see, when the communists came on board in 1949, there was already a lot of Christians already there. And there was a Christian tradition thanks to Hudson Taylor and the China Inland Mission and Gladys Aylward and others. Okay, so they couldn't say, well, no religion at all. In fact, they did try to do that between 66 and 76 with the Proletariat Cultural Revolution, but after that it came back on. And in response to it being outlawed during the Cultural Revolution, the house churches were started, and the house church movement now outnumbers the TSPM membership by a long shot. The government controls on the TSPM. No Sunday school, no youth programs, no teaching on creation or Jesus' return, no healings, no evangelism. So if you're going to be a member, if you're going to be a pastor, there's got a very fine line that you have to walk to be in obedience with the government policy, and you will be monitored on a Sunday by Sunday basis. There's 50,000 TSMP churches. When George Bush visited, when Nixon visited, when Condoleezza Rice visited, they went to church at the TSMP churches. 10 churches per day being registered, 1 million baptized per year in the TSMP churches. But there's obvious compromises of TSMP churches, pastors, leaders. House churches are trying to avoid government control and manipulation by operating underground. Heavy persecution by government with fines, arrests, jail time, church closures and burnings. Did you see that little video we showed at the beginning? Sometimes taking bulldozers and knocking down the churches. We heard testimonies just as we were waiting for Larry to arrive. We were trying to kill time, see? So we showed that. Perhaps twice to 4 times the number of house churches as TSMP churches. Some ministers in both types of churches, in other words, some churches will have a minister in the TSMP churches, and they'll do an underground church as well. Some people go to the TSMP churches, but they'll also do underground as well. Only one ordained pastor for every 7,000 members. 20 TSMP seminaries, however, with 2,000 students and 10,000 distance learning students. In the third world, distance learning is the big way that pastors are trained. Perhaps 100 to 200 million believers in China. Estimates vary. The government will estimate low, and we're getting other reports from on-site groups and the underground house church networks, about 30 different networks of house churches that report much, much higher and growing rapidly. This is the most rapid evangelization in the world. This is the most rapid growing number of believers in the world. India has as many people that are unsaved, but the growth rate is not nearly as rapid. In China, it could be between 10 and 20% of the population. In India, it's only between 2 and 3% of the population. You see what I'm saying? Here's our good friend, the Menzies family, who was down here to speak. I've met with him several times in Orange County, where he itinerates and stays with his wife's folks, and he has 2 daughters. And he is in Kunming, which is southwestern China, and he runs a Bible college. Here it is, and a booglebug factory, which makes fishing lures on the side to cover for what he's really doing. And I'm going to ask John if you can read that.
One of our students is a member of the Hui minority group. Most Hui are Muslims. In fact, while there are 50 million Hui in China, there are less than 500 Hui Christians. Recently, Brother Zhang, a house church leader, spoke in our chapel. After an inspiring meeting, he met personally with our Hui student who feels called to take the gospel to her people. I still remember his words of exhortation. He said, "There are 3 fears that you must overcome. if you are to share the gospel with your people. First, don't be afraid of poor living conditions. Secondly, don't be afraid of difficult work. And finally, don't be afraid of going to prison. If you overcome these fears, the Lord will use you in a powerful way.
And from what we can tell, the Lord is using Bob in a powerful way. Can you continue to read that a little bit louder?
Little did we know that we all would face a lesson in overcoming fear. About a week later, 13 police officers visited our Bible school. Thankfully, our students and faculty all knew exactly what to do, and the police officers were impressed with our Boogaloo production capabilities. Their visit appeared to be routine. In April and September, they take a head count of everyone living in the area. Although the large number of police officers usually only 2 or 3 policemen visit, that they may indicate that they wanted to intimidate us. Whatever their motive, we, along with our students and faculty, were not discouraged. We feel that this is a time to be bold, to overcome our fears, and to move forward. Clearly, we are helping the local villagers, all non-Christians, through our cottage industry as God has granted us favor with the local leaders. We also believe that He has great plans for all 24 of our students. Please pray for us, continued favor with the local officials, courage and strength for our students, our Boogaloo workers that they would grow in their faith.
What are boogaloo?
These are fishing lures that they're importing to the United States, and they're being bankrolled by a parishioner in Atlanta, and they're actually rather good fly fishing lures and hooks. And so they are using this as a cover for their operation, so when the police come, they look and see people manufacturing these things and exporting and importing. They're somewhat out in the countryside from Kunming, and when this vigilante is gone, then they can go back to normal Bible college activity.
What I didn't understand when I first read that letter was that he goes into a village and he hires the people who want to work, but they are also, and he said right there that a lot of them are not Christians, but they have to quickly hide their stuff and start working on the boogaloo things when they know that the authorities are coming. And what is the reason that they are willing to do that if they aren't believers to begin with?
Because some of them come from these villages. See, students go out to villages that are unreached and convert certain numbers. And the ones that are right will be sent to the main locale and the main boogaloo factory. And they're there with the idea of learning how to manufacture, but at the same time, they're going to Bible classes. By the time they leave there, in 6 weeks to 6 months, they're converted. They can go back to their locales, work in a boogaloo factory, and help spread the gospel. So they're evangelizing those workers who are taking a kind of internship at the home location. They don't go there and hire people and expect them to be Christians automatically. They have their students go out there, then other people are sent back. They're trained in the boogaloo, trained in the gospel. Some people pick up the gospel, some people don't. They all go back, and the ones that are trained in the gospel further evangelize. The countryside of China is Buddhist by heritage, but the new generation and the young generation are agnostic, atheistic, materialistic, mainly. Okay? I chased these girls around the apartment building. Everyone lives in apartments. And they kept running from me. I threw yuan at them. They picked it up and threw the yuan back. And the gentleman on the left stopped them and said, he just wants to take your picture. The girls with the red scarves are in the Young Pioneer Communist Club. Outside of Shanghai, this is your F-150 pickup. Okay? Everybody has a bicycle. That's your trusty source of transportation. When the Portuguese first came here, and then the British, they were looking for silk. And before we left, we're going to Japan. I said, look, buy your silk here. It's $3 a yard. In Japan, it's going to be $30 or $40 a yard. My mother is the one in the green pants. You'd recognize her, right? She was a Lutheran school teacher for 40 years. And she goes on all my trips, except that last year, exactly at this time, she passed away in St. Louis at age 90. So we all are aging. Here's the silk rugs. And it used to be where we would carry these things back as real treasures in the 80s and 90s. But shortly thereafter, we started carrying them at the Home Depot. And you could get them even cheaper than we got them. We have them all over our house. These silk rugs from, this was long before the Soviet Union dropped its communism, there was free market economics on many streets in China. You could go there and sell anything you had, and this was legal. And I was shocked in the 70s and the 80s when I saw that. Of course, the government and the Soviet Union changed radically, and the government here in China hasn't yet. There's a row of Buddhas. Here's the porcelain Buddha. Here's a Buddhist temple. We're free to go in, look around. A lot of incense, a lot of prayers going on. But the difference is that in America and in Christianity, we are trying to rid ourselves of sin and get eternal salvation by the blood of Jesus Christ. Is that right?
Amen.
Whereas in we did Hinduism lesson. In Buddhism, this is a different program altogether. It is the cessation of suffering. Okay? Getting to heaven is a whole different thing. There is no heaven. You have to go through many lifetimes to merge with the universal spirit. In this case, it's not the Brahman, but it's called nirvana. And that is the Buddhist approach. So when Tiger Woods erred, he offered himself a great, great hardship because he increased his suffering by 100-fold over what he did, and it's going to be that way for the rest of his life. He admitted that as much. This is the difference between Buddhism and Christianity. And of course, also in China, you have to go through the lifetimes like we do in India. So there is an appeal of Christianity, a great appeal. Ping pong was first invented. I'm in a collective farm apartment here. But in the early days, we started seeing some Western clothing. This is at Tiananmen Square. I went into what they call the friendship stores. These are the places where they take the visitors, and they're one step above what the normal Chinese can afford and the kinds of products that they offer. And the first thing I did was I went to this gal and I said, I want a red fox, the largest you have. Because I wanted to buy my mother a red fox, and they were $300 instead of $3,000, like they are at Saks on sale. Okay? And so she came up with the largest one she had. It was like a size 8, you know. My mother was a size 16, you know. So it was a good buy, but it was the wrong size. Here are the guys who are retired. They're in their Mao outfits. Many people still wear the Mao outfits. And they're sipping tea, and they're very interested in the Westerners. Now this guy, we didn't have, in the early days, McDonald's and Coca-Cola. I was there in China before they had that. And if you want fast food, you dropped in at the rice noodle factory. And this guy's going to give you whatever you want. He's got a bowl of soy sauce and rice noodles. You got to have your chopsticks in your pocket. Now watch what he does. He takes the bowl that somebody gave him back, that he had filled and they eaten out of it. He dips it in a bucket of water and then fills it and gives it to you. It's a piece of china. And here they are, sitting down on their haunches and eating at the China rice noodle factory. Do you see shoulder harnesses? And you go in the rural areas, you do. If you go in the rural areas of rice, you do. It helps if you have a 300mm zoom, like I did on this particular one. This is the Russian-made bridge over at the Yansees. Every town has a water lily park with terracotta, water and lilies, beautiful hydrangeas, and once in a while, the Chinese wearing a red dress, a red Western dress. Wherever you go, you see the medicinal cures. And here's a medicinal garden, or medical cures. Buddha here. Many cities in the frontier of Xinjiang, out in the west, are walled cities. This is the tower of the walled city. And this is rush hour in 1989. The people are walking, the people are riding their bikes, and there's a few jeeps, and that was all it was. Buddhas, the parents are working, and so people are taking care of their children. The dragon is the quintessential image. If you go to Tibet and look at your reflection in a lake, sometimes you don't know whether you're upside down or not when you look at your slides. I think this one is upside down. And what would be the animals in the foreground? If they're famous in the crossword puzzles, they begin with a Y.
Yaks.
It's the yaks. These are the high places of Taoism in Tibet. And here are the low places in Guangzhou, north of Hong Kong. And the pagoda is the quintessential architectural feature. My group is on the left, and we have another group on the right. And I used to hike to the top and take pictures. Now I stay at the bottom and ask people to go up, and I'll take their picture. This guy has a trained cormorant. You know what the cormorant does, don't you? He goes fishing. And they'll tie a rope around his neck, and he'll catch a fish, and he'll bring it up to the... And every fifth one, he'll untie it, and he'll swallow it. With the other 4, he goes to the fisherman with the yellow hat on right there. Here we are down in the south. Very beautiful. These ladies are waiting to see the physician, and they have acupuncture needles stuck in their hands. This is in south in the Guilin River trip. It's near Kunming and Guilin. It's the most beautiful part of China. I went on a communal housing project at a farm, and I'm knocking around trying to see what I can see. I can't get in trouble because I brought people over here, and China wants tourism. Why? Because they want the foreign exchange. Because the people in the tourism industry work for 10 cents an hour that produces foreign exchange. They also want technology, they want Taiwan back, and they want trade, 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 and they've got trade, 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 don't they? This is China, but it's not easily accessible. It's in the far south. If you're a storyteller and you do the, what do they call it when it's behind the screen? Silhouettes or whatever. You're a very famous person in the village. We're building some dogs out of balloons for the kids right here. Here we are at the Ming tombs in Mongolia. The Mings were defeated by the Manchus. And here we are. In the distance is the Outer Mongolia. In the foreground is Inner Mongolia. Now we're in Beijing. This is the Temple of Heavenly Peace, built without nails. It's one of their kind of Washington monuments, I guess. Inside the dome, looking up. This is the Forbidden City, the Royal Dragon, the eaves of the, and then back out to Beijing at rush hour. People are riding buses, they're riding bikes, and now they're riding automobiles, standing on the corner waiting for the bus to come by. I was just looking at the methods of adornment, mostly Mao outfits, parked in Beijing. I went inside a department store and the gal was balancing the books with an abacus. Here's a Horton Plaza parking garage. No locks, they give you a little medal, and if somebody steals your bike and they find it, there's 10 years in prison, okay? These are policemen, and you're not supposed to take anything military, any police, any government installations. And I'm in Tiananmen Square here, and I've got my 300mm zoom, and I saw these guys, and I went around like this, and I got them pretty close. Most of the time you get blurry pictures, so they didn't know that I took that picture, but you may not take their picture. Then I turned around and I saw these people, and I said, who are these people? Because they look like Mayans. They look like Native Americans, the Navajo Reservation. Well, guess what? These are the Mongolians. And they are visiting Tiananmen Square in the Forbidden City. Notice their red complexion. I thought the Aleutian land bridge theory looked like it had some merit. You know what I'm saying? The idea that 10, 20,000 years ago during the Pleistocene, these people walked across on dry land and populated the Americans. These are Mongolians. Then I heard a bunch of clicks behind me, and I turned around, and these guys are taking my picture. I don't know why, and they're from Japan because the local Chinese at that time couldn't afford cameras, so I took their picture. Here's the Forbidden City, the moat. Here's the crown jewels of China, hamming it up at the Ming tombs. Here's the economy of China. Economic liberalization, hardliners versus pragmatists. This is what's going on. It's kind of a vacillation back and forth. 70% of the population is still in agriculture. Privatized state farms, 20% in manufacturing. Only 20% in manufacturing. You would think that everybody was in manufacturing, considering the news. But there are privatized state factories, and because of it, a heavy growth, a dramatic increase in living standards. $1,000 per capita GNP. America is 45, by the way, by comparison. And Luxembourg is $70,000 per capita GNP. Most development is in the Hong Kong hinterland territory of Guangzhou and the coastal provinces, which can ship in and out much more rapidly. 20% unemployment, 30% in rural areas, so there is some discontent. 200 million workers without meaningful employment. It's a coal-based economy. They don't have oil, they don't have uranium, they have some hydro. That's what the Three Gorges Dam is all about. It produces a lot of air pollution, a lot of hydrocarbons, which leads, they say, to global warming. Okay, high hydrocarbon output, global warming. China needs oil just like America, and because of it, the price of oil will never go below $3 a gallon. I guarantee it. Until America starts pumping their reserves, which are under North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, and all of Canada, forcing up world prices. So in China, this is what you have: crass capitalism and overconsumption versus a market socialism which says, no, 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 the government will control everything. It's just a matter of time before the frog in the frying pan in the hot water boils to death, I think, but it could take 40 years. The China-U.S. tensions are over high exports. The U.S. requests China to lower their currency, to allow their currency to float upwards so that product coming into America aren't so cheap, because China is financing our desire for all these toys and electronics. And it's also keeping the American interest rates very low, okay? Why? Because China's holding $750 billion worth of treasury bonds, and as long as that's happening, we can't really exert any pressure on China and get away with it. To show them how nasty we feel about everything, not allowing their currency, the yuan, to float upwards, which would make our imports to their country more attractive, and their imports to our country less attractive, so we would have this huge trade imbalance. They are selling off a few of their bonds, and we decided to ship $7 billion worth of armaments to Taiwan and talk to the Dalai Lama about independence for Tibet. Okay, that's my argument to what's happening with China and the U.S. with regard to the economy. Here's some economic indicators. 1,200 GNI per capita, that's gross national income. And here's this guy selling manure. This guy has made some orange soda and he's selling it. And this is the people coming into town to sell what they made the night before. And yet at the same time, you have a GM factory in the Guangdong province, right here, producing automobiles for a country that has an insatiable desire for automobiles, washing machines, television, all the things that we're used to, but they're not used to yet. Here we are at Shanghai. Beijing is shown here. This is the gross domestic product, so the coastal areas have the highest. That's the front, that's the Bund, the waterfront area in Shanghai. This is a little different slant on things, but they're making carpets. Here's the exports. Again, the coastal province doing very well, but most people live inland and they're not doing very well. Here are the deposits of coal in the gray and the manufacturing zones in the orange. I noticed they were rebuilding a church, and the superstructure was not metal or scaffolding, it was bamboo. I stayed in this diplomatic compound, in the room that Ronald Reagan stayed in and Joe and I stayed. Looked out the window and saw this. This man, Mr. Chu, is our hospitality expert, and he's toasting to the United States. I had that many people. My mother's seated there in the white blouse, and about 8 of those tables. I came in late, and they all looked at me and said, Mr. Chu went around and did all the toasts for America. Now you have to go around and do all the toasts for China. So I spent the next half an hour doing all the toasts for China. We had a little red liqueur right there. And I don't know what it was, but it tasted good. And by the time we were done making all the toasts, we couldn't taste any of the Chinese food, which I heard was very good. I blended in China perfectly. No one could tell I was there. The children at the children's palace, after-school activities of the young communist pioneers. And if you're lucky, you can go on a recess and play in a Japanese MiG that was down in World War II, the Chinese dragon boat races. Here's an old soap factory that was run by the government and has now been privatized. And the Chinese love their acrobatics. And the Circus Soleil stuff from Las Vegas has a Chinese overtone to it. If you haven't seen it, they're very excellent with acrobatics and opera and Buddhas. When I first went to Hong Kong, it looked like this. And you can take the funicular up to Victoria Peak, and there it is. It's an island offshore, by the way. And in 1997, it reverted back to China. China wanted Hong Kong back. The British had a 100-year lease. In 1997, they could have fought, but they didn't. They gave it back to China. The people could have left. But China promised this: one country, including Hong Kong, and what? 2 systems. One is communist, one is capitalist. Can it work? The answer is it's worked so far. It's been 13 years. And we think that the osmosis of capitalism has led to the changes in the coastal provinces, and it will finally hit Beijing at some point. Okay, here's what it looks like today. That's the smart money. It's stayed in Hong Kong. It weathered the storm. It's doing well. You don't have complete freedom of speech and assembly. You can't what should I say, criticize the government, but it's where the action is, folks. It is even more vertical than Dubai. Yes. Here are the answers to prayer. There are many. I've listed about 8 here. Survival and reviving of the church in China vis-a-vis communism. You'd think it would have been killed off by now. Phenomenal church growth in China. It has no parallels in history. the rapid growth that's going on now. The manifest failure of communism left a vacuum filled by the gospel. It happened also in East